Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel, where we make learning English easy, fun, and exciting, through incredible stories from history. Today we have something truly special for you. We are starting a brand new series on the life of one of the most legendary figures in American history, George Washington. This story will not only improve your English, but also take you on an unforgettable journey. You will learn new vocabulary, sentence structures, and the art of storytelling, while discovering the life of America's first president. We promise you, by the end of this series, you will not only speak better English, but also feel inspired by the incredible struggles and triumphs of George Washington. So, get comfortable, listen carefully, and let's begin this fascinating journey. Part 1. The early life of George Washington. It was a cold and quiet morning on February 22nd, 1732, in the British colony of Virginia. In a small farmhouse in Westmoreland County, a baby boy was born. His name, George Washington. Little did anyone know that this child, born into a simple farming family, would one day lead a revolution and become the very first president of the United States of America. But his journey was not easy. His life was filled with challenges, loss, hard work, and important lessons that made him into the leader the world remembers today. George Washington was born into a large family. His father, Augustine Washington, was a hard-working man who owned farms and plantations. He was a respected businessman, but life in the 1700s was not easy. The family depended on farming, and every day was a struggle to survive. George's mother, Mary Ball Washington, was a strong and strict woman who believed in discipline and hard work. George had not siblings, but not all of them survived childhood. In those days, many children died young, due to diseases and lack of medicine. Life was unpredictable, and young George had to learn the importance of strength and resilience from a very early age. When George was just 11 years old, tragedy struck. His father, Augustine, suddenly passed away. This was a devastating moment for young George. Losing a father at such a young age meant that he had to grow up faster than other children. His mother Mary had to raise him and his siblings alone, and she was very strict about discipline. She taught him the values of hard work, honesty, and responsibility. Since his father had died, George did not inherit much land or wealth. His older brothers received most of the family property, and George had to find his own way in life. But this challenge only made him stronger. Unlike many famous leaders in history, George Washington never went to a proper school. He did not receive a high-level education like other wealthy children. Instead, he was homeschooled by private tutors and learned basic reading, writing, and mathematics. One of his biggest influences was his older brother Lawrence. Washington Lawrence was like a father figure to young George. He had served in the British military and was an educated, disciplined man. George admired him and learned a lot about leadership, discipline, and responsibility from his brother. There is a famous story about young George Washington and a cherry tree. It is said that when he was about 6 years old, he received a small axe as a gift. Excited to use it, he went into his family's garden and chopped down a beautiful cherry tree. When his father asked him who had done it, little George did not lie. He bravely said, "I cannot tell a lie, I did it." His father was so impressed by his honesty that he forgave him immediately. This story became legendary because it represents Washington's strong moral character and honesty, values that stayed with him throughout his life. As George grew older, he needed to find a way to make a living. Since he did not inherit much from his father, he had to work hard to build his future. By the age of 16, he started working as a land surveyor. This meant that he measured and mapped land for people who wanted to buy or sell property. This job was not easy. George had to travel through dangerous forests, cross rivers, and sleep outdoors in harsh weather. But these experiences made him tough and taught him survival skills that later helped him in war and leadership. By the time he was 17, George had become very skilled and respected in his job. He earned good money, and people began to notice his intelligence and discipline. He was no longer just a young farm boy. He was becoming a man of responsibility and ambition. Just as things were going well, tragedy struck again. In 1752, George's older brother, Lawrence Washington, became very sick with tuberculosis, a deadly disease at that time. George took care of him and even traveled with him to warmer places, hoping the climate would help. But sadly, Lawrence passed away. This was a heartbreaking moment for George. He had lost his father at 11, and now his beloved brother at 20. But instead of giving up, George became stronger. After Lawrence's death, George took over some of his responsibilities, and even inherited Mount Vernon, a beautiful estate that would later become his lifelong home. After losing his brother, George's life took a new turn. He was now a young man with experience, discipline, and a strong sense of responsibility. People started noticing his leadership skills, and soon he would step into a role that would change his life forever. Part 2. The Journey to Leadership. By the time George Washington turned 21, he had already experienced loss, hardship, and responsibility. But now a new challenge awaited him, one that would shape his future and prepare him for the great battles ahead. During this time, Britain and France were in a conflict over land in North America, especially at the Ohio River Valley. Both nations wanted control over this valuable region. The British government needed someone reliable and brave to deliver a message to the French, demanding that they leave British-claimed land. They chose George Washington for this dangerous mission. Washington was young, ambitious, and eager to prove himself. In 1753, he set out on a difficult journey through dense forests, freezing rivers, and dangerous Native American territory to deliver the message to the French commander. The mission was not easy. He faced bad weather, illness, and even an assassination attempt when a Native American guide tried to kill him. But Washington survived and returned with valuable intelligence for the British. This mission showed Washington's courage and determination. Even though the French refused to leave, his actions impressed British leaders, and he was promoted to lieutenant colonel in the British colonial army. In 1754, Washington was given command of 150 soldiers and sent back to the Ohio River Valley to drive out the French. This was his first real military command, and he was eager to prove himself as a leader. He and his men built a small fort called Fort Necessity, but things quickly went wrong. The French attacked with a much larger army, and Washington's men were outnumbered and unprepared. After a long and difficult fight, Washington was forced to surrender, one of the only times in his life that he ever did. Even though this battle was a failure, Washington learned important lessons about warfare, strategy, and leadership. He understood the importance of preparation, discipline, and understanding his enemy. This experience would help him later when he faced the mighty British Army at the Revolutionary War. The British and the French were now in full war, known as the French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763. Even though Washington had suffered a defeat, he was still highly respected for his bravery and leadership skills. In 1755, Washington joined the British Army in a major campaign to drive the French out of North America. He served under General Edward Braddock, a strict British commander who believed in traditional European warfare. But Washington knew that fighting in the forests of America was different from fighting on open battlefields in Europe. During the Battle of Monahah, the British were ambushed by French and Native American forces. It was a complete disaster. General Braddock was shot and killed, and the British soldiers were terrified and confused. But Washington remained calm and took control of the situation. He led the surviving troops to safety, saving hundreds of lives. After the battle, something incredible was discovered. Washington's coat had 4 bullet holes in it, but he was completely unharmed. Many believed that he was protected by divine intervention, and this event added to his legend as a leader destined for greatness. After the war, Washington was promoted to colonel and became the commander of all Virginia forces. But soon he grew frustrated with the British military system. Despite his loyalty and hard work, he was not given the same respect and promotions as British-born officers. This planted the first seeds of resentment against British rule in his heart. By 1758, Washington retired from the military and returned to Virginia. He was now 26 years old and ready for a new chapter in his life. He had fought hard, gained experience, and learned the strengths and weaknesses of the British Army. But he was tired of war. He wanted a peaceful life, managing his estate and starting a family. In 1759, Washington married Martha Custis, a wealthy widow with 2 children. Martha was kind, intelligent, and a great partner for George. Their marriage gave Washington financial security and allowed him to focus on growing his plantation, Mount Vernon. Washington became one of the richest men in Virginia. He expanded Mount Vernon, experimented with farming techniques, and became involved in local politics. He was respected, successful, and happy, but fate had other plans for him. During the 1760s and 1770s, tensions between Britain and the American colonies began to rise. The British government imposed heavy taxes on the colonies without giving them representation in Parliament. This angered many Americans, including Washington. He believed in freedom and fair treatment. He saw how British laws hurt farmers, business, and ordinary people. He began attending meetings with other colonial leaders to discuss resistance against British rule. Part 3: The Road to Revolution. By 1775, the American colonies were on the edge of war with Britain. The British government had been taxing the colonies heavily, imposing harsh laws and refusing to give them any voice in Parliament. The people were angry, and many were ready to fight for their freedom. In April 1775, the first shots of the American Revolution were fired at Lexington and Concord. The colonies realized they needed a strong leader to unite them and lead their army against the most powerful military in the world, the British Army. All eyes turned to George Washington. Washington was already one of the most respected men in America. He was a war hero, a wealthy landowner, and a strong leader. When the Second Continental Congress met in June 1775, they unanimously chose Washington to be the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. Even though he accepted the responsibility, Washington knew this would be the greatest challenge of his life. The American army was weak, poorly trained, and lacked weapons. The British Army, on the other hand, was well-trained, well-funded, and had powerful warships. Washington had no choice but to fight smart, use strategy, and never give up. Washington's first real test as a commander came in Boston. The British had taken control of the city, and Washington needed a plan to drive them out. He trained his army and with clever strategy managed to force the British to retreat in March 1776. This was a huge victory for America. But soon, things became much more difficult. In August 1776, the British launched a major attack on New York City. Washington and his army fought bravely, but they were badly outnumbered. They suffered a terrible defeat, losing thousands of soldiers. Washington had no choice but to retreat. Many of his soldiers lost hope. Some even deserted, ran away from the army. Winter came, and the situation became worse. Washington's army had little food, no warm clothes, and no money. Many believed the revolution was about to fail, but Washington refused to give up. On Christmas night, 1776, he launched a daring attack on the British at Trenton, New Jersey. In the middle of the night, Washington and his men crossed to the icy Delaware River, surprising the enemy and winning a crucial victory. This battle boosted morale and gave the soldiers hope again. The winter of 1777 to 1778 at Valley Forge was one of the hardest times of the war. Washington and his army camped in the freezing cold. They had no proper shelter, barely any food, and many soldiers died from disease and hunger. But something incredible happened. Instead of breaking down, Washington used this time to train his army. With the help of a European officer, Baron von Steuben, he turned his poorly trained soldiers into a strong, disciplined army. By the time spring arrived, Washington's army was ready to take on the British again. For several years, Washington continued leading his army in battles across America. Some battles were won, others were lost, but he never gave up. In 1781, with help from the French army, Washington led his troops in a final battle at Yorktown, Virginia. After a long fight, the British army surrendered, marking the end of the war. America had won its independence. Part 4. The First President and His Final Years. After the Revolutionary War, America had won its freedom. But there was a big problem. There was no real government, no strong leadership, and no clear direction for the new country. The people needed someone they could trust, someone strong, wise, and respected, and that person was George Washington. In 1789, Washington was unanimously elected as the first president of the United States. He didn't want to be president. He had already served his country for many years and wanted to retire to his farm in Mount Vernon, but the people trusted him, and he felt it was his duty to lead. On April 30th, 1789, George Washington took the oath of office in New York City, the first capital of the United States. The entire country celebrated. People cheered in the streets, church bells rang, and newspapers called him the father of our country. Washington faced many challenges as the first president. The United States was a brand new country, and everything had to be built from scratch. There were no rules for how a president should lead, no traditions, and no example to follow. But Washington knew that every decision he made would set a precedent, an example for future presidents. He wanted to create a government that was fair, strong, and respected. One of his first acts as president was to create the first cabinet, a group of advisors to help him run the government. He chose Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State, Alexander Hamilton as Secretary of the Treasury, Henry Knox as Secretary of War. These men helped Washington build the foundation of the American government. Being president was not easy. Washington faced many difficult problems. 1. Money problems. The U.S. was in debt after the war. Alexander Hamilton helped Washington create a financial system to stabilize the economy. 2. Foreign threats. Britain and France were at war, and both wanted America to take sides. Washington decided that America should stay neutral. 3. The Whiskey Rebellion. In 1794, farmers in Pennsylvania rebelled against a new tax on whiskey. Washington sent troops to stop the rebellion, proving that the new government was strong and would not tolerate violence. 4. Political divisions. Two political parties started to form: the Federalists, led by Hamilton, and the Democratic Republicans, led by Jefferson. Washington hated political parties and warned that they would divide the country. Despite these challenges, Washington kept the country united and created a government that would last for centuries. After serving 2 terms, 8 years as president, Washington decided to step down. Many people wanted him to serve a 3rd term, but he refused. He believed that no president should stay in power for too long. This would prevent a king-like ruler. Before leaving office, he gave his famous farewell address in 1796. In this speech, he gave 3 important warnings. 1. Stay united. He warned Americans not to let political parties divide them. 2. Avoid foreign wars. He believed America should stay out of conflicts in Europe. 3. Protect democracy. He told the people to always defend their freedoms and never let one person have too much power. His words became a guide for future leaders, and many of his warnings still apply today. After leaving office, Washington returned to Mount Vernon, his beloved home. He planned to spend the rest of his life as a farmer, enjoying quiet days with his wife, Martha Washington. But his peaceful retirement did not last long. In 1799, Washington developed a severe sore throat after riding his horse in the cold rain. His condition quickly worsened. On December 14, 1799, after being treated by doctors who mistakenly bled him too much, George Washington passed away at the age of 67. The entire nation mourned his death. People cried in the streets, church bells rang across the country, and even leaders in Europe honored him. Napoleon Bonaparte of France ordered 10 days of mourning in his honor. Even after his death, Washington's influence remained strong. He set many traditions for future presidents, serving only 2 terms, which later became law, creating the cabinet system, giving a farewell address, keeping the country neutral in foreign wars. Today, Washington is honored in many ways. The capital city, Washington, D.C., is named after him. His face is on the $1 bill. His home, Mount Vernon, is a historic site. The Washington Monument in D.C. stands in his memory. Schools, streets, and parks bear his name. There is even a holiday dedicated to him, President's Day, where Americans honor his leadership and the role he played in shaping the nation. But Washington's legacy is not just about statues and holidays. It is about values, courage, and leadership. He was not a perfect man, but he was a man who gave everything for his country. He could have been a king, but he chose democracy. He could have stayed in power, but he chose to step down. He could have let the country fall into chaos, but he set the foundation for a strong and stable nation. What can we learn from George Washington? 1. Leadership with integrity. Washington led by example. He was honest, responsible, and always put the needs of his country above his own desires. In life, true leaders are not those who seek power, but those who take responsibility. 2. Perseverance in difficult times. He faced many defeats and battles, but he never gave up. He believed in his cause and fought until the end. This teaches us that failure is not the end, but a step toward success. 3. Humility and selflessness. He refused to become a king because he believed in democracy. He showed the world that real power comes from serving others, not controlling them. For courage to make difficult choices. Whether in battle or politics, Washington made tough decisions. He teaches us that true strength is in making the right choices, even when they are difficult. 5. Unity over division. He worked to bring people together, not divide them. In a world full of conflicts and differences, we must learn to build bridges, not walls. George Washington was more than the first president of the United States. He was a symbol of hope, determination, and democracy. His story reminds us that one person can change the course of history. His life teaches us that true success is not about wealth or power, but about leaving a legacy that inspires generations. So whenever you see his name, his face, or hear about him, remember the lessons he left behind. Be a leader in your own life. Stand for what is right. Never give up, no matter how hard the journey is. Because just like Washington, you have the power to shape the future. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. Keep learning, keep growing, and always believe in the power of one person to make a difference. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful and engaging stories that improve your English while teaching you history and life lessons.